think I feel a draft. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Hi, I'm Ryan Martin, and I'm here to talk about the first American draft lottery. In 1968, President Richard Nixon issued an executive act which made it mandatory for certain American male citizens to go out to the Vietnam War. And this act came to fruition in 1969. Now we're here to talk about this with someone who was alive and well during that time, Mr. Charlie Robinson. He educated us greatly, and I hope that he educates you about this matter as well.
Well, I was born in Texas City, Texas, in June of 1949, and I went to Hitchcock High School, elementary school. It's in Galveston County, and went all the way through from first grade through my senior year, graduated in 1967. Had a pretty simple life, you know, and so then I ended up going to college to Lamar. It was Lamar Tech at the time. It's now Lamar University. But during that time is when Vietnam was going on and the draft came about.
Mr. Robinson's experience with the draft was quite different from the others, although it shows his patriotism nonetheless, as he was truly willing to go to war, regardless of the circumstances.
I was working part-time at an elementary school making a little gas money, hamburger money, and I'd gotten to know the teachers very well. And on the day of the draft, I didn't even wake up remembering it was the day that they were announcing it. And it was in the newspaper in Beaumont, a whole page, and it listed all the birthdays and then the numbers. It was like a lottery. They just picked. And when I walked in, all the ladies were sitting there with the paper in panic mode because they were wondering if their little college boy was about to go off to the Army. So they asked me my birthday, and I said June 16th. And one of them went, "Oh no," and literally started almost crying. And because it was like a very low number, which meant, you know, later tater, you gone. And then one of the other ladies says, "You blind bat." She said, "That's January 16th. He's June 16th. And my number was like 250 something. I think they took the first 200. My number didn't come up, I didn't go. Had I been drafted, I would have gone. There were some guys saying, "I'm leaving and going to Canada, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that." My dad is a Marine. He's 89, he's still a Marine. So I grew up in in a family setting that was very patriotic and about God and country kind of thing. And I would have gone and hopefully come back and then finish my degree later.
Now, while at the time of the draft, Charlie actually was not very spiritually involved.
I was a Christian or believer, but I was in the desert. So that's what followed me into college, and even some years after college before the Lord really rescued me. So during that time, I really wasn't, if I called out to God, it was just like in a fearful, panicky kind of way, not because I knew Him intimately. To be honest with you, I never really dwelt much about death. I just sort of lived life, but I didn't think much about the here and after at that time. I was maybe just young and naive and maybe a little stupid, I don't know.
After doing research on the draft, we learned that a lot of the controversy that was caused by it was actually just speculation due to after the fact, such as people with September birthdays or October birthdays being targeted by the government. That was all just speculation that happened from after the fact, as Mr. Robinson hadn't even actually heard of that at the time.
I can honestly say I never even heard that during that time. Not one person ever said that. I think that was more of a speculation today, looking back. You telling me that right now is the first time I've ever even heard that. Even though, you know, there was a record of some people who went to Canada to avoid the draft. That number would have been relatively small to the population of all those being drafted. No, I did not see a big influx of people packing their bags and going to Canada. It was an unpopular war at the time, just in the culture, you know, as far as our United States. It wasn't an unpopular war for me personally in terms of when my guys were going, my friends were going. You know, I was wishing the best. I was proud of them. They were doing what their country asked them to do, and so like I said, you know, some of the things I hear about now about that time. You know, like you said before, I would scratch my head and say, I don't remember that at all.
After further discussing the topic, we found that there was a lot of controversy revolving the topic of the draft, even so to the point in which there was fake news created only for the sake of fake news.
What I do remember is in college, I remember some of the demonstrations, and one happened on our campus at Lamar. They were protesting in front of the bookstore and the library, and some of them went inside the bookstore and knocked books off the shelves and that type of thing. And but when my parents called me later that week, they thought the whole campus was in an uproar, because the cameras showed those 50 as though they were 500 or 5,000, all the different angles and so forth. So I think just like it happens now, it happened back then. The news, the more spectacular, the better the viewership. So didn't think about it that much then as I do now, and compare things to today. From the perspective of the media, when they just reported the war as it was, yes, they reported it. You know, the part I guess where when I think of the media leaning toward more of making sure that they did a lot of coverage on the riots and the protest and so forth, that I think the media took a position to help it be an unpopular war. But they didn't make the war worse than it was. The war was bad. I think the news, like anything, likes to have controversy, and therefore they would always try to pit the government against the people's will, and with Vietnam and the Vietnamese people. But basically my friends, my ones that were serving, were glad to serve. They really believed that they were defending our country and that there was a threat that they were helping to squelch. But it was also a war that was very difficult to win, because you couldn't tell who your enemy was. You know, in the other previous wars, it was pretty distinctive. The uniforms they wore, where they were geographically, but here they are in the jungles, and you got North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and they both look exactly the same.
While Mr. Robinson wasn't directly involved in the war, as he was not actually drafted in it, he was friends with many people that suffered greatly from the war and the draft.
Yes, because it was real. I had friends, older friends, who were in Vietnam and going into Vietnam. I had one who was the best halfback on our football team, who came back with a leg missing. I had my college roommate's brother was sent home because his elbow had been blown away. And so all this was real. It wasn't just what we saw in the news. There were a lot of casualties. And so yeah, you thought about that a lot. They would talk about sleepless nights, literally trying to sleep. And one guy told me, I literally learned how to sleep with one eye open. And then when they returned to come not to a welcoming parade, but to people scorning them, you know, called them baby killers, when all they were doing, they were fighting a war, and they were doing what the government asked them. And so that's why I'm thankful for things like God and Country concerts that we have around. You know, we have one at First Baptist has had for years. And we honor all the veterans, including the Vietnam vets, and sometimes that's the only time they ever got told thank you. Isaiah 43, it says, don't call to mind the former things or ponder things of the past. Behold, I will do something new, will you not be aware of it? So if we always focus in on the past, we'll never look forward to the future, because he says, I'll even put a river in the desert and a pathway in the wilderness. And so, you know, God wants to do that new thing, and but he doesn't want us always looking back. But we need to learn from the past, but not dwell on the past. That's the hard part for the guys that I still know that are my age, old guys like me pushing 70. They still have wounds that are more emotional than anything from those days, and so that's part of the tough part.
Charlie Robinson's story has truly been an inspiration for us, and I hope it has been for you as well. We thank him for all the time that he's given us throughout this documentary, and I hope that you enjoyed everything that we've shown you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm still a bit drafty. I'm going to go get a blanket.